Welcome to All Grown Up Now, a tale of retail, relocation, revenge, reinvention, reckless behavior, really good clothes, indiscretion, infidelity, domestic violence, and one kidnapping. I'm Kenneth D. King, podcasting from my studio near Union Square in New York City. This podcast is another in a series of installments from a novel I wrote called All Grown Up Now, A Friendship in 3 Acts, available on Amazon.com. It's the story of a small-town boy who dreams of being a grown-up and his journey to get there. Each week, you'll hear another installment of this story. I am pleased to announce that BearWorldMagazine.com will be one of the sponsors of all of the episodes going forward. In the last episode, Ken and his trophy husband start their divorce. Episode 15, Dances with Landmines. The place, San Francisco. The time, fall of 1987. When I'm furious with someone or something, I get really quiet. As long as I'm talking, there's nothing to worry about. But when I go silent, that means trouble. Now, people accuse me of being unfeeling, of having no emotions. Having the ability to set emotions aside until I can deal with them in private isn't the same as not having them. To me, it's a seemlier way of dealing with them. And again, it's that thing of casting pearls before swine. So, because of my trouble with my trophy husband, I went completely silent. And boy, oh boy, there was indeed trouble in my house. Now that I saw that he was sticking around for the meal ticket, I was done with him. It takes me quite a while to make up my mind that I'm done with someone, but when my mind is made up, it's made up. So for all of September and most of October, I said not a word to Matt. If he and I were in the apartment, which I avoided by staying at the studio very late, I would act like he didn't exist. That's the way I am when I'm done with someone. I withdraw completely. No screaming, no harsh words, just ice. It drove him crazy. But he was driving me crazy as well. There was Andy, the 22-year-old co-ed from San Francisco State. She was one of those girls who fall for fags. Andy would show up at our apartment, and the next morning I would find groceries in the fridge. They would also spend lots of time in Matt's room knocking boots. The bisexual issue raised its ugly head again. I spent longer hours at the studio. As an aside about Andy, a couple of years later, I ran into her at my church. When we came face to face, it looked like 2 cats staring each other down with their hair up on end. But I thought to myself that I was in church and should behave. "Could we go for coffee?" she asked. "Why on earth would I want to do that?" I responded politely. "Because I want to apologize." So we went for coffee. She explained that she was in therapy and had to confront the idea that she chose unavailable men, and this caused her quite a lot of trouble in her life. She decided to stop doing that, which was her lesson from that interaction. "I want to apologize for the pain I caused you," she said. "I understand that you were going through rough times, but I knew that you'd be okay." "Thanks," I said. "You know, when Philippe came back from France, Matt took the 2 of us out for dinner one night. He told us that he loved both of us, but he knew that you 2 would get your problems worked out and stay together. He never thought you'd kick him out." "What I learned during that time was about boundaries," I said. "No needs to mean no. I draw a line and then erase it, and then I found my back against the wall." "He said he was hurt that you told him you'd say hello if you saw him on the street." She laughed. He just couldn't believe it. We talked some more and then said our goodbyes. She was moving to Africa to work in an orphanage. I never saw her again, but I'm grateful for the apology and the little tidbit she left me with. It seems Matt would meet her at the door wearing pantyhose and my best pair of high heels. I had wondered where those went off to. In the meantime, the stock market crashed. I remember sitting at my work table listening to the reports every 15 minutes on the radio that day, telling of the latest drop. I remember thinking, I'm fucked. There was a sinking feeling in my stomach as well. Not yet a year in business, no savings, my credit card stretched to the limit, leaving my husband, and now this. It wreaked havoc with my finances. The very posh store got nervous and stopped ordering, and this left me high and dry financially. Another store that Brenda, my agent, had sold to stiffed me and returned ordered merchandise, damaged at that so I couldn't resell it, which only exacerbated the situation. One day in late October, Matt came into my room early in the morning, early was the only way he could catch me, to tell me that Philippe was coming back for a week's stay, and I had nothing to say about it, so I had better get used to it. Great. Philippe arrived a few days later. They immediately disappeared into Matt's bedroom for a reunion fuck. I went to the studio. The next day, I had an appointment to get publicity photos taken at my photographer friend David's. I came home in the afternoon to shower, shave, and dress, only to find the young lovers fucking in the bathtub, which was damned inconvenient. Somehow, I managed to shave in the kitchen sink and get it together to go to get those photos taken. Poor David, he tried and tried his best with lighting, music, and encouragement to make me look powerful and sexy. But it didn't work. I hate those photos and never look at them. For all the good lighting and camera angles, you can plainly see the pain in my eyes. 2 days later, I had to go look at proofs. That day it had started to rain, and the roof of my studio was leaking a 20-gallon trash can of water an hour. I ran over to David's during a break in the rain, wearing a shapeless black coat, jeans, baggy sweater, and 2 days' growth of beard. He brought out the contact sheets. Then the doorbell rang. He buzzed the visitor in. In walked this guy who no doubt was genetically the model for the master race, Hitler's wet dream in the flesh. David explained that the guy was on a go-see, so I should just look over the proofs, and he would be done in a few minutes. In my weakened state, the Hitler Youth was even more intimidating than he normally would be. I was acutely aware of my unshaven, unkempt appearance and wanted to crawl into a hole. And then it happened. David told the Hitler Youth to mess up his hair, which the kid did. The hair, as if by magic, sprang back into place, leaving him flawless still. I could take it no more. I have to go, I said as I hurried out. Puzzled, David started to ask what was wrong, but I just held up a hand and mumbled something about I'll explain later and stumbled out onto the street. My only thought was to get to the studio. I would be safe in the studio, and that's where I headed. I would be safe there. The phone was ringing when I got there. Warily, I answered it. It turned out to be Brenda, my agent. My relief was only momentary, as she needed to talk. As it was, Brenda was pregnant and having a hormone surge. During this surge, she started ruminating on whether or not she would be able to represent me after the baby was born and felt she needed to make the call and talk to me about it right then. After a while, Brenda noticed I wasn't saying anything, wasn't even making a sound. As it was, I was trying to stave off a full-blown panic. Stock market crashed. Sales of merchandise non-existent. Flat ass broke. Husband screwing his new boyfriend back at the apartment. Leaving the husband. The prospect of no representation and hence no income. I was doing all I could to keep from going insane right then. Yes, Brenda realized that I was unnaturally quiet and started asking if I was all right. Did I need someone to come by? Should she call 911? Or just should she stay with me? She insisted that she was just thinking aloud and probably would keep representing me. Ha 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 ha. Not to worry. But the damage had been done. I got off the phone in a panic, and I didn't feel safe in the studio anymore. But where should I go? I couldn't go home. The happy couple was there, no doubt fucking their brains out. I couldn't stay in the studio. Brenda might call and start in again. So I wandered the streets, ending up at Church Street Station. Back in the day, Church Street Station was sort of like the gay Denny's. It was on the corner of Market and Church and was one of those classic dive diners, open 24 hours with a counter and tables. In my younger days, I used to end up there after a night of dancing. On this particular night, the only place I felt safe was at Church Street Station. I found a table in a corner and spent quite a while there, crying into my coffee. The waiter would creep up and refill occasionally, but otherwise he left me alone. Then came the Susan Hayward moment. Looking down into the coffee cup, I saw my reflection, unshaven, swollen, puffy eyes, and looked down at my shapeless black coat. What the hell am I doing? I thought to myself. I need to pull myself together. At which point, I looked up and out the window, just in time to see Matt and Philippe walking by arm in arm, the picture of new love. God, just take me now, I thought. Needless to say, I'm still here. After that, I went home and posted a note on Matt's bedroom door that read, "I don't have the money for this month's rent. You're going to have to come up with the rent this month like I've had to for a long enough. I can't live here in peace, so I'm not paying another cent." The next morning, I got a note. I'll be moving out December 13th. It was over finally. Or so I thought. Mark was no help whatsoever during this period. After a couple of phone calls, I realized that he didn't want to hear about my divorce for whatever reason. This was really infuriating. I had listened to him chewing my ear with years and years of bad Victor bitching, so the least he could do was be a little sympathetic. But he wasn't. He just changed the conversation to Victor blah blah blah. Thanksgiving that year promised to be a sad and gloomy one for me. No money, business in the toilet, divorce pending. I was feeling a little sorry for myself. So my friend Laurel Fanenga invited me out to dinner on Thanksgiving Eve to cheer me up. Now, let me introduce you to Laurel. Laurel is someone who I regard as a brilliant artist. She and I were the millinery industry in the Bay Area in the mid-'80s. Where my hats were extravagant, hers were minimal. What we both had in common was a love of quality and a love of the process. In our own ways, we developed our respective visions, diverse as they were, based on a similar philosophy. That of doing one's own work, doing it really well, and not copying from others. So on Thanksgiving Eve, Laurel felt sorry for me, and we ended up going to the Castro for dinner. Parking in that neighborhood being as it is, Laurel had to park the car at 20th and Diamond, way up the hill from the Castro. When I got out of the car, it sounded like water running. I listened and heard that the sound was coming from under Laurel's car. I looked under the car and saw a leak in the gas line, leaking gasoline at an alarming rate. "Laurel, are you aware of this leak?" I asked. "No, but let's go get dinner and deal with this later," was her very sensible response. After dinner, we went back to the car. It wasn't too hard to find. We just followed the rivulet of gasoline in the gutter from 18th Street up the hill. Looking under the car, it looked like the join between the fuel line from the gas tank to the fuel line going to the engine had popped loose. I proposed going down to the local service station, getting a length of small rubber hose and 2 screw clamps and bridging the gap. So off we went to the Chevron station. This was one thing I loved about Laurel. She just rolled with this. She commented on how impressed she was with my improvisational skills, and I reminded her that I had indeed worked in window display, which made finding quick and practical solutions necessary. Also, owning an old car made me resourceful when it came to keeping it on the road. We returned with the necessary parts, got under the car, and at one point needed to pull the gas line from the tank loose to get the hose on. This no doubt would produce a shower of gasoline. I gave a count of 3, we pulled, and under the shower of gasoline, quickly got the hose on and secured. You know, someone could destroy the millinery industry in the Bay Area with one lit match. Just like that scene in the movie The Birds, Laurel commented as we marinated in a puddle of gasoline, tightening the screw clamps. You're the only person I know who would do something like this. I'm impressed. The millinery industry survived, but my Periella shirt did not. This gasoline smell never left it. It was during this crazy period that I learned a very important lesson. Don't ask what else, because you'll get an answer and you won't like it. My life had taken on the quality of dances with landmines again. There seemed to be one more landmine exploding at my feet every day, and after the detonation, I would ask, what else can go wrong? Then another landmine would detonate. This is something I had been determined never to repeat. I lived with this when I was a teenager, and I'd be damned if I would let it go on much longer now that I had a choice. This is why I forced Matt's hand by leaving the note on the door. In early December, I finally got an order for one of my evening vests, and I was damn glad of it. There was only one problem. I needed bulk silver to melt down to make the signature sterling buttons and hardware. Remember Daryl from my Oklahoma City days? He never knew this, but he took care of me by remote control. As I had no cash reserves, my solution was to go to my jewelry box. Daryl had been very good to me. To this day, I can see and hear that scene in my head. It was night and raining outside. The fluorescent light over my head was buzzing, and I put my jewelry box on the desk. Then I took a screwdriver and started taking pieces out of the box and prying the stones out of them. Then I stacked them up on the desk like carcasses picked clean. As I sat there, picking stones out of the many silver pieces Daryl gave me, I silently thanked him and hoped he wouldn't find out, or if he did, would understand why. I was able to melt down the silver to finish the order for the vest, which was white. This piece of information is important later. Over the next couple of days, I made that white vest and felt I was almost home. Money would be coming soon. When I finished the vest, I left it on my work table, thinking that was the safest place for it, and then went home for the night. We had an unusual amount of rain during that fall and winter. This particular rainstorm, which started soon after I got home that night, made it into the record books, flooding the storm drains and streets and jamming traffic. When I got to the studio the next morning, I pulled the big front door to the studio building open. Somehow, I wasn't too surprised to see a puddle of water emerging from under the door to our studio space. Oh God, please don't let that be what it looks like, I implored as I opened the studio door. It was. My side of the studio was under 3 inches of standing water. Now, it was quite beautiful, actually. The reflection of the studio in the water was perfect, unblemished by any ripples, just like a mirror. The boxes with all of my fabric, which were sitting on the floor under my work table, were expanding noticeably, soaking up as much water as they could. To top it off, the vest that I had just finished, the white vest that someone had ordered and would soon pay for, the one I melted my silver jewelry down to get the hardware made for, was soaked, ruined. It was as if someone had found the direct center of it, taken a plumb line up to the ceiling, and poked a hole in the roof exactly over it. Muddy water had been pouring over it for quite a while. Then suddenly, an incredible calm came over me. I didn't feel the need to ask what else would happen. I wasn't upset. Just calm. Marshall came in right then and saw the mess, which didn't extend to her studio, and looked at me to assess my state of mind. Eyeing me suspiciously, Marshall asked, "Are you okay?" "Sure," I said. "Really?" She was waiting for the meltdown, followed by a call to 911. I calmly walked over to the phone, splosh, 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 and made a lunch date with a friend. "Yeah, I'm okay," I said calmly. "Let's mop up the water, and I'll hang up the fabric to see what dries out. Then I'm going to lunch." That's when I knew I'd be okay. It was over. Finally. I was talking on the phone to Mark one evening during the first week in December when Matt started hectoring me about wanting to open the phone bill. I got off the phone and reminded him that the phone bill was in my name and also that I had been the one paying it. So for the life of me, I couldn't fathom his concern about the phone bill all of a sudden. Until he told me about the transatlantic phone calls. Calls. Plural. Well, needless to say, I had a few words on that subject. He feigned concern, wanted to reimburse me for them, didn't want to take advantage of me. That's why he wanted to open the bill. He eventually stiffed me for that as well. Then he got on his high horse and wanted to have a talk. I sat down on the sofa and calmly said, okay, this relationship is over and you're leaving in a few days, so say what you have to say. Go ahead, I'm listening. I have some things I want to say, he shouted. I realized that. Go ahead, I said, I'm listening. All I wanted was to be your lover, he whimpered. He could always do the puppy eyes and the quivering lower lip really, really well, and he was putting on an Oscar-worthy performance now. No, Matt, I said. All you wanted were the rights and privileges. You didn't want the responsibilities. I never asked you to change your friends, or the way you dress, or who you are, or how you behave. I took you as you were. All I ever asked of you was that you supported yourself, but that was the one thing you denied me. What's the other thing you wish to say? I asked calmly. When did you decide you didn't want me anymore? The moment you said that you were miserable and would have left me if you'd had a job, I answered. I suspected that you were sticking around because I was the meal ticket. You just put it into words, something I never really wanted to admit to myself. Well, I was just trying to make you mad. Well, you succeeded. I'm still mad. A long silence. Then he asked, what is the future of this relationship? I couldn't fucking believe this question, and I was glad I was sitting down. Obviously, he didn't understand that I had made up my mind already. I'm sure he was expecting me to back down. God knows I did it all the time with him. But although it takes me a while to make up my mind, like I've said, once my mind is made up, it's made up. So I had to make it perfectly clear. If I see you on the street, I'll say hello, I said. That's it. If you have any fantasies of us being friends or going out to dinner or getting back together, forget them now because it's not going to happen. Then I went to bed, feeling much lighter. December 13th couldn't come fast enough for me. It was a Sunday, and I was going to a Christmas party that evening with my friend Laurel. Matt showed up that morning with a woman whose name escapes me, but she had a British accent, so I'll call her Brit. Brit was a friend of Philippe, which she pronounced Philip, and since Philippe was back in France tying up loose ends, Brit was pressed into service to help find Matt and Philippe a room and help move him in, as I had vetoed his request to use my car. I certainly wasn't going to help. I had done my part already. So I sat on the sofa drinking coffee and eating croissants and watching to see that nothing of mine walked out the door. He did get away with my dove gray trimline phone, though. Not that there was much Matt had to move. He owned the rotten Herculon sofa that lived in the dining room, a ratty kitchen table and chair that lived in his bedroom, his books and records, a very expensive and large stereo that he purchased in Japan, and a shabby mattress. There would have also been the piano, but he gave that to the Salvation Army the week before, as there would be no space for it in his new digs. Pity. As an aside, while he was packing, I had a little revenge. Matt fancied himself a gourmet cook, so I swiped his spice rack and his dildo. I knew he would miss them both terribly, but couldn't afford to replace them anytime soon. I could tell he was looking all over for them, but he never asked me where they were. I just sat on the sofa, looking wide-eyed and innocent. After he loaded the first load into Brit's car, Matt started out. Brit said she'd stay behind to keep me company, as if I wanted company. The front door closed, leaving me face to face with Brit. I turned and said, "So, are you sleeping with him too?" Because, you know, he has another girl named Andy. "Oh, my goodness, no," she stated indignantly in her British accent. "I'm a friend of Philip, not Matt." "So, how did you get mixed up in this mess?" "Believe me, I'm doing it for Philip," she responded. "I quite frankly don't see what he sees in Matt." "It's probably the sex," I said. "Well, know that one day Matt will do to him what he's doing to me. Also know that I supported Matt for the last 3 years, and I'm now in debt because of it. That's what Philippe has to look forward to." We chatted a little more, and then Matt came back for the other load. After he took down the last of his things, he came back for a last goodbye. After looking around the apartment, he said, "It doesn't look like I was even here." That was true. All the furniture was mine, the good stuff anyway. I hope Philippe wasn't counting on having spiffy furniture. If he was, well, yeah. Was my response. Then came the big eyes and quivering lip. "Goodbye," he said. "Goodbye," I chirped. "I'm going now." More quivering lip and big eyes, and a slow walk to the door. "Goodbye," I said again, a little more pointedly. He walked out the door and closed it slowly. I started doing a little happy dance, and the door opened. "Take care of yourself," he said, bigger eyes and a really quivering lip and a heavy sigh. I walked over to the door, pushed him out, shouted, "Goodbye!" slammed the door, locked it, and put on the chain. He was gone. Then I thoroughly cleaned the house and burned lots of sage and went to that party with Laurel. As I said earlier, Mark wasn't much help during all of this. He seemed not to hear that I was going through a big mess in my life. When I'd start to tell him what was going on, he'd interrupt with a harangue about Victor's misdeeds or improvements. Looking back, as I was telling him that I was leaving Matt, perhaps if he had really listened to what I was saying, he might then have had to look at his own situation. It really was irritating, feeling like I wasn't being heard, but I was used to it. At the end of 1987, after Matt and I split, I let go of the apartment that we had shared. I never really liked it and couldn't afford it on my own. Then as now, I had a rule. If I'm not sleeping with him, I'm not living with him. So, no roommates. Instead, I moved into the studio and slept on my broken down sofa listening to the mousetraps clacking like castanets at night. I discovered that mice like Skippy peanut butter the best. Who knew? This lasted for the first half of 1988. Not ideal, but it was what I had to do. These were really primitive digs. For food, I had a hot plate that I'd boil water for ramen noodles and frozen vegetables on, a combination I still refer to as austerity rations. Breakfast was peanut butter on apples. For a shower, I had a dishpan and a quartz heater. After business hours, I'd strip down, stand there in the dishpan naked, pouring water over myself, feeling all the time as if I were basting a turkey. I used to joke that in the made-for-TV movie of my life, they would need a body double for this scene. In the next episode, Ken gets his first high-profile order, complete with the side of drama. Thanks for listening. I'd like to thank BearWorldMagazine.com for sponsoring this podcast. You can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Spotify, and Google Play. If you have questions or comments, you can reach me through the website, which is allgrownupnow.com. You can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Kenneth D. King, on Facebook at Kenneth D. King Design, or on my main website, KennethDKing.com.